All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending this in person or on the internet through Zoom. This is actually the area Professor Jayakar will study universal access to internet. Okay, I really don't need any form to check like the Professor Jayakar's background because we work together for nearly 20 years. And I still freshly remember when I walked in the Carnegie building at Penn State, and we shared the same building office there. And he invited me immediately to go to Panera for coffee and wonderful snacks. Since then, I love like a Panera a little bit more, because it's always reminding me something good memories. And before I came to Hong Kong, and then Murray Harding, the dean also invited me to go to a Panera for some snacks and a coffee. Professor Jayakar actually had been working for Indian Ministry of Telecommunication and Broadcasting. That's before he went to the United States and then attended master's degree and got his PhD degree at University of Indiana University. So he's basically expert in policy, telecommunication policy, and now is the head of our Department of Telecommunication, and study, and also the co-director of information policy. Center Institute at Penn State University. So all these years, I came to know him, and not only as an expert in telecommunication policy, and also as a friend, and also as a very, very good colleague there. We have a lot of things to share. I use his office, and we co-advising students, together. And he is the first person who used Google Analytics as a teaching material and for his class. And I follow his suit, and I'm using Google Analytics later on too. So I personally learned so much, and from Professor Jayakar. I'm sure you will do. Listen to his new study about smart cities. How about you take it from here?
So this is live, right? Mm-hmm. Good morning, everyone, and I wanted to thank Dr. Boujong, Dean Boujong, for this invitation to visit Hong Kong Baptist University. Like Dr. Zhong said, we have been colleagues and friends for close to 20 years now, and it's interesting how you mentioned that coffee always. I think it is the best coffee I ever spent because it has rewarded me so many ways since that time through friendship and through all sorts of collaborations with Dr. Zhong. So thank you very much for the invitation. I also wanted to thank Dr. Salahuddin and Dr. George at the Center for Media and Communication Research at Hong Kong Baptist for organizing the trip, and Dr. Karyatukis of the Lam Institute for East-West Studies for co-sponsoring the event. So thank you very much, both of you. And thank you all for coming. And Dr. Meena, it's a very busy part of the semester, so I really appreciate that you made time to come today. So I'm Krishna Jayakar. I am at the Penn State University Institute for Information Policy, as well as the Department of Telecommunications. This is a relatively new research topic for me because I started working on it possibly 5 years ago. And since then, I've been doing a series of papers and journal articles on smart cities. So I wanted to very quickly introduce the topic of smart cities and why that is important as a research subject before we get into the papers themselves. So globally, countries are rapidly urbanizing. The percentage of the population that lives in cities has been going up all through history. And right now, a majority of the world's population is living in cities. And in certain countries, like for example, China, that urbanization has been quite strong. The percentage is estimated to be about 2/3 right now. But rapid industrialization is also causing a variety of problems. There are problems in providing basic infrastructures, including housing and water and electricity and transportation and parking, all those things. And it's not just problems, there is also the promise of cities, because cities all through history have also been centers for innovation and growth as well. All major technological innovations and scientific developments can be traced to cities in one way or the other. So they have become engines of growth for their areas as well. So the smart city, what exactly is that? It's basically the use of information and communication technologies in a variety of ways to provide for the basic infrastructure needs of cities. Smart cities have become very popular the world over. If you look at the data, there are various indices available now listing and comparing and indexing cities in terms of various types of indicators. For example, there are some of these here. There is the Cities in Motion Index that covers 174 cities, the Smart City Index that's been around for some time that looks at 142 cities and so on. The largest database seems to be IHS Markit, which is now owned by Standard & Poor's. That lists about 900 smart city projects in the world. The amount of money involved is also tremendous. Right now, the global market is estimated to be almost $750 billion in 2023, and the cumulative annual growth rate of about 25% indicates that more and more money is going to be spent on smart cities in the next 5 or 10 years. One estimate said that there would be up to $15 trillion of investments by 2030. The comparison you see on the right side is only the US smart cities market, which is also growing tremendously. But the major impetus for the smart cities movement is coming from Europe right now. So what exactly is the smart city? It has become sort of a buzzword since about the 2000s. 900 projects that we mentioned, they cover a variety of different things. You've got mobility and transport, energy and resource use, the physical infrastructure, governance, healthcare, safety and security, and so on. All sorts of projects involving ICTs in some way and data in some way. Now, so what I'm going to do today is talk about two of my papers, one of which was published in Telecom Policy in 2019. It was one of the first papers I worked on, but it sort of lays the groundwork for some of the analysis that I want to do going forward as well. And the other paper is the one that is one of my most recent papers on it, which looks at data governance models. So these are the two, and I would like to end with some speculations for future work, because I'm sort of working on a book on smart cities, and so the last part of what I'll talk about covers some of the ideas that I would like to cover in the book. So the first project on identifying smart city archetypes, and then we'll go on to the second one. So this was research conducted at the University of Electronic Science and Technology of China at Chengdu. I used to have a visiting appointment there between 2017 and 20, used to visit twice a year. And this team and I collaborated on this project on smart city archetypes. So what it's all about. So basically, despite all the hype surrounding the smart city, there is very little consensus on what it stands for, what it is supposed to cover. It could be, for example, a digital city. There's lots of talk of a digital city, a green city where environmental concerns predominate. Sometimes you talk about entrepreneurship and business ecosystems. Sometimes it's about the deployment of e-government services to make the city more inclusive, and so on and so forth. There seems to be something for everyone. So basically, if there is something for everyone, that means that there is no conceptual clarity. So one of the things that we wanted to do was take a look at exactly what projects are being implemented in smart cities. So take a look at the the data on smart cities. So what we did was content analysis of municipal smart city plans. We looked at a variety, we did a selection and looked at what exactly is a smart city, what are they doing? I mean, what are city planners doing in terms of smart cities? So what specific programs and initiatives are covered? Are there any models? That means, are there certain paradigms or archetypes that people are implementing? And what are some of these characteristics of these models? If there are models, what are these? So that was the questions we asked. So why expect archetypes at all? Why expect models? Now, one argument is that smart cities are motivated mostly by local problems. So if Hong Kong has got a traffic problem, there would be a smart city solution tailored to address that problem. Now, if Shanghai has got a different set of problems, the smart city implementation there could be quite different. So there is no reason, if we are driven primarily by local factors, to expect a model at all. So why do we expect a model? So there are several reasons to expect a model. This is the first argument, that it's driven primarily by local problems and resources. So there is no reason to expect a common model across different cities. But there are also theoretical constructs, things that are supposed to represent what a smart city ought to be, or normatively what it should accomplish. There are national guidelines. Many countries have got national guidelines. And then there are stakeholder advocacy. We'll come back to this at the end of the talk when I'll talk about the role of corporate advocacy. But that's a topic for the next paper I'll present. So for all these reasons, we can expect that there would be some commonalities, some common patterns in smart city plans. So what did we do? What we did was we took a convenience sampling method to identifying smart city plans. We basically did an extensive keyword search to identify smart cities. So we did searches with a number of different keyword combinations, essentially strategy, plan, project, plus smart city, digital city, and we tried out different languages as well, ciudad intelligente or cité intelligente. I mean, using different combinations of the phrase. We tried to be geographically diverse, and as you will see in a moment, we were not very successful. Our oversampled from certain places and less from others, but that was our goal, to choose a geographically representative sample. And we restricted ourselves to municipal plans. There are certain national and regional plans, and we did not include those. We were only looking at municipal plans. So from each of these plans, we selected the key planning documents. For example, I should have lined this up before, but you can look that up. I mean, I'm sure Dr. Salahuddin might be able to share the PowerPoint deck for online users. And if you're interested, you can look that up. That is the Smart City Plan for Hong Kong. And there are a number of initiatives included there in the plan. So these are the plans that we looked at. As you can see, we oversampled from Europe. There are lots of plans that we looked at from Europe. Actually, that was not completely accidental, because there is a strong smart city movement in Europe compared to other parts of the world. But we also took care to include enough from Asia and North America and from Australia. But as you can see, we did not have a single plan from from South America. We could not find any single plan. That might be because of our linguistic limitations, because there was no person who was very confident with Spanish. I can read a little bit, but I'm not very confident. So we did not include Spanish language city plans in our sample. So, all what we did after selecting this plan was basically to look at the number of different projects or programs that were included in each plan. There were several like selection criteria that we used. One, it should be ongoing or contemplated. That means a future plan. If something has been completed in the past, we did not include it. For example, let's say a city says, oh, we have got a very nice entrepreneurship system in the city. We did not include that because that's just a claim, it's not a plan. Secondly, a declaration of intent without a plan were not included. For example, if someone says that we would like to have a green city, that's not a plan, that's a wish. So we did not include that as well. So with this limitation, and again, we also looked at only plans that involved ICTs. For example, a city beautification plan, like to set up urban green spaces. Very often we found that in smart city plans, there are these sort of goals as well included, but we did not include those. Riverfront development, no, we did not include that unless there was an IT component. So in all, we started with 18 categories and different types of projects. This is based upon Easy Park's Smart Cities Index, but eventually, because of the process of coding, we ended up with 25 project categories. So intercoder reliability, just for those who are interested in the method. Now, this is what we found. These are the 25 categories. Not all of them are on this slide because there is one group here at the bottom which says other, that includes a whole lot of categories, but the major ones are listed here. As you can see, there were digitization of government, seems to be extremely common. We have got about 90% of plans that included digitization of government. Now that is low-hanging fruit. To use an American phrase, basically because it is so easy to implement. You start with City Hall itself by computerizing data, computerizing city records, applications, and things like that. So 90% of plans had some form of digitization of government. Traffic management, because practically every city in the world faces congestion and traffic problems. So that also seems to be a pretty common category. 80% of plans had traffic management. But as you go down, you see there are less and less popular ones. For example, smart parking, only about half the cities had smart parking. Smart city lights, about, again, half. Digital healthcare, urban planning, all of these are less popular categories. Now the last column over there also includes the percentage of all projects in the category. We had about 663 projects that were included in the analysis. And of those, about 7% involved digitization of government. So that's the raw data that we work with. Now, the next one, I've got a little star at the top that says, in the interest of time, I can skip this slide. If there are questions about this, I'll come back to it. This is just the method, and the method that we use, basically what we did was, we tried with all sorts of correlations. This is our raw data about the co-occurrence probabilities. We did that. And I'm skipping over this. If there are questions about this, I'll be glad to come back to it later. And then we looked at the combinations of categories that are most commonly implemented. And then we did a hierarchical cluster analysis using Jayakar scores for those who are interested. And this is our result. And these are our results. Again, skipping over this. And this is the findings that I'm going to talk about. So these are the models that we identified. First, there is very commonly an infrastructure model that basically looks at the deployment of all types of ICT and other infrastructures with an ICT component. For example, you can have water management, smart sewer management, smart waste management, and so on, all of which involving some ICT component. So there are lots of cities that deploy an infrastructure model. Number two, there are some cities, it's not a very common category, but it was identified as one of our clusters, that is a green model with basically clean energy, energy management, environmental protection, all again using ICTs. That is the most prominent example in this category was Tokyo. The civic participation model, again, this is encouraging the participation of citizens in civic decision making through polls, public affairs, digital government, and so on. Scandinavian cities were very commonly represented in the civic participation model. We had the transportation model. Again, we differentiate between infrastructure and transportation because transportation is single issue, but the infrastructure model addresses a number of different areas. Transportation models include smart traffic management, and digital government, for example, getting your licenses renewed or getting your car permit renewed using ICTs. 3 European cities are included in this model. And finally, we had the e-government model. This is now, it is interesting that we did not have a large representation in this category. That is because, as we saw earlier, 90% of cities had some form of e-government initiative. So it's so common that it cannot be the basis for a cluster. It's like a common denominator among all city plans. So we did not really have a very big e-government cluster. But basically, you're looking at digital government as a primary feature of this model. So with this analysis, we have a reasonably good idea about what cities are actually implementing. We thought that before we get into any type of smart city analysis, you need to have this empirical basis, the basis in data. So I'm going to quickly skip over this as well, because again, this is only about this particular project. We had a small sample size, which is a problem. There are about, as we saw, 900 cities. We sampled 50 of them, so that's not a very big sample. We had problems with geographic representation, and language representation was also a problem. So, directions for future research. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly move forward to the next project, which is the one that I presented at TPRC this year. That's the Telecom Policy Research Conference in 2024. And we are looking at data governance models. So, all the projects that I mentioned in the previous paper, digital governance, green, environmental, transportation, all of those are premised on the collection of huge amounts of data. So if there is one common element of all smart city projects, it seems to be the extensive collection of data. From a variety of collection implements using like sensors and cameras, GIS mapping, GPS devices, personal phones, medical devices, medical alert systems, things like that, e-government records. The list goes on, the amount of data that is collected. Now, all of this is being stored and processed in a variety of ways, including AI, big data, and so on. Now, these technical capabilities are at the heart of smart city data collection as well, because without these capabilities for processing the data, collecting it in the first place is not very useful. So you need to have these technologies for the archiving and processing and cross-referencing of data. That's very essential. So with the widespread collection of data, a lot of questions are raised about data governance. What data can be collected? How long can it be stored? Who has access? how can privacy and security be assured, and so on. Now, these are all indicative of the importance of data governance. Now, data governance there is a huge literature on this. If any of you are interested, there are, in fact, even complete journals devoted to data governance. But one of the things that I'll point out later about this literature is that there is less applicability to the smart city. It is much more likely that when you're talking about data governance, you're talking about a corporate setting. So what is data governance? Basically, the specification of decision rights and accountability framework for the use of data. That's what it comes to. It has been defined in a number of different ways. Here's another definition: a cross-functional framework for managing data as a strategic enterprise asset, and so on and so forth. You can go through that yourself. But these are the common features, the key elements of these definitions. One is defining data as a strategic enterprise asset. So that means this is something that is a profit center, basically, for a corporation, for an enterprise to profit from, to make money from. Decision rights, who has the ability, the opportunity to make decisions about data? Responsibility and accountability, how do you fix that? What are the framework? What is the hierarchy for deciding this? Compliance monitoring, how do you make sure that all these rules that are created are being implemented? So basically, it's about the formal data policies, guidelines, and protocols for the use of data within enterprises. That's the predominant, the prevalent definition of data governance in a corporate setting. So why is this a problem? I mean, I believe that's a problem. And the problem is this, that when you apply it to smart cities, we run into a completely different environment that makes it hard to implement a data governance framework within the context of the smart city. So what we did in this paper was take a look at data governance policies at the level of the smart city. So what did we do? We looked at things like data governance policies. Again, we did a search for smart city data plans. They are called by various names. It's always a little hard to identify exactly what they are. Citizens' data rights, data use guidelines, digital rights statements. Various smart city plans have got all of these documents listed by very different names. But we tried to be exhaustive in our search for these plans. Now, so how many cities have a data governance plan? The short answer is right up there. Very few cities do. Among all the cities we looked at, only a handful had a data governance plan. So Columbus, for example, Columbus in the US, Ohio, has got the Smart Columbus Data Privacy Plan. New York City has got the guidelines for the Internet of Things, privacy and transparency. Vienna has got one. Los Angeles has got one. Hong Kong has got a very short plan. And Dr. Salahuddin, can we pull up that document? I mean, would we be able to? Just wanted to show you what the privacy policy for this Hong Kong smart city looks like, because we are in Hong Kong. So if you could scroll down. So this is the policy for the Hong Kong smart city. If you could scroll all the way to the bottom, that's it. That's the plan. So it just says that the privacy plan will adhere to all local laws. That's what basically it says. Beyond this, there is no other data governance framework for the Hong Kong smart city. Now, this is what you find in city after city. There is a very short statement which is lacking in basically specificity and details. So now if you could go back to the presentation. So the question becomes, if there are so few cities with smart city plans, and if the existing smart city data plans are so minimal in nature, why is that? And what can we do about it? Or should we be doing something about it? Oh, yeah. So it's not as bad as it sounds, because many countries have got plans at the national level, and some of them apply to smart cities directly. For example, India has got the Smart City Data Policy Guide, which is produced by the Ministry of Urban and Housing and Urban Affairs. The United Kingdom has got its national plan. The US Ignite has got it. It's not a plan. It's not binding on smart cities, but they have got a system for promoting good data governance standards in smart cities. So it's not that bad as it sounds. And many other cities have got other ways of implementing data governance. For example, Barcelona, Paris, Reykjavik, cities like this have got chief data officers who are responsible for protecting security and privacy and data protection and so on. Seoul has got a data dashboard. This is another element of data governance. It's not just that you're expected to protect it, but it's also that you're making it accessible to people who need the data. So Seoul has got a data dashboard that promotes accessibility. Seattle has got the Privacy and Cybersecurity Committee that again involves citizens in data governance and privacy standards and things like that. So that's another approach. And of course, we saw that, for example, in Hong Kong's case, there is a declaration that all local laws will be obeyed. So there are other ways of protecting data, but it still leaves a troubling question for me. Why are smart city projects not framing data governance policies? So one answer is that the data governance framework is not really applicable to a smart city environment for some reasons. First of all, they are based upon a clear-cut line of authority, lines of command, who answers to who, and things like that, which may not be applicable in a smart city setting because smart city environments, urban environments, are very diffuse in terms of hierarchy and control. For example, let's say that we have a smart energy management program. Now, there might be multiple stakeholders involved there. There might be consumer advocacy groups, city government, the local energy company, maybe pollution regulators, national regulators, and so on. So it's very hard to set up an accountability framework when there are so many parties involved. So smart cities operate in a very diffuse environment. It is not one organization that is involved. There are many different, it's a multi-layered, as one source said it, it's a multi-layered and a complex ecosystem where there are no clear lines of authority and control. There are 4 unique challenges to smart cities as well. Multiple agencies and stakeholders. There is the mandate to provide e-government on a universal basis, especially for the poor who don't have access often to ICTs and information appliances like computers. So sometimes you have to encourage things like neighborhood information kiosks, the security of which may be harder to maintain. So there are these problems with e-government. There are open government rules. For example, city governments as governments are expected to conform to freedom of information. So for example, someone may ask about the data for a particular projects and they have the right to access it. But if you're talking about an enterprise, there is no such obligation to release information to the public because it counts as proprietary data. So open government rules are another wrinkle, another problem for smart cities as well. Now, the last complication is vendor relationships. And the rest of my presentation, I'll take about 10 more minutes to talk about vendor relationships in smart city projects. Now, so there are, I mean, I'm trying to find reasons to justify smart cities for not having data governance plans. So this could be a reason, but here's the other one. Again, I'm going to skip over this slide. There is a star at the top that says that I can come back to this later if needed. So I'm going to skip over this. And the main reason I believe that smart cities don't have a data governance plan is because of the role of vendors. There are lots of vendors out there who, for example, some of the largest technology corporations in the world, including Cisco and IBM and Google, that have got very big smart city divisions. It's a big part of their marketing push. So, and some of them are not premised upon the provision of services alone. That's not what they are doing. They are basically collecting data and using that to provide other services or develop new products. So let's take a look at these, right? So there are lots of enterprises involved, and they use data primarily as a strategic asset, and many of the vendors involved see it that way. They see it basically as a resource that can be exploited for commercial gain. But the smart city governance framework has got the strong involvement of vendors as well, which creates problems. There are irreconcilable differences introduced into smart city data ecosystems because of that. So here's one statement that says, what's the role here? This might be a little hyperbolic. It says smart cities are in service to capital as a form of control rather than emancipation of its subject citizens. This is from a book called Too Smart. It's a critique of the smart city movement. So let's delve a little deeper into this relationship between the smart city and the vendor. So big corporations like Cisco, IBM, Google all have enormous divisions specializing in smart city products and services. How do they make their money? Hardware sales, they market devices, routers, switches, computers, terminals, all of these to cities. That's a big part of their revenue. Number two, services, training programs, planning and consultancy, after sales service, all of that counts as big revenue sources. Third, long-term leases and operating contracts. Very often a vendor will come in, implement a project in a city, they will operate it for a time and then transfer it, like build, operate, and transfer systems for smart city projects, or build, own, operate systems. So these are legitimate. This is exactly what happens in a vendor relationship. They provide a service and they get paid for it. That's natural and expected. But at the same time, vendors have a second incentive as well, which is what is called datafication. Now, we all shop at supermarkets, at least I do at my local supermarket, and I've got a little discount card, and that card gives me 5% off every time I buy something. So what is in it for the supermarket? Why are they giving me 5% off? It's basically because they are collecting my data. And that data is much more valuable than that 5% discount they are giving me for them, because they use it to develop all sorts of supply chain management, as well as marketing data, advertising data, all sorts of things for consumers like me. So that is the datafication model, where the derivative products based upon data are being marketed to different groups of consumers. So that is big. And here's an example. I mean, I'm going to give you some examples here. Anecdotal but suggestive. This is going to be put on YouTube. I don't know how many hits it'll get, but this is, I mean, I hope it's not, I'm not suggesting that any of these companies are actually doing it with ulterior motives, but these are some of the services that are based upon access to data. So CanView, for example, is a company that provides connected roads technology, basically traffic management technology, but they can also, they have a product for providing real-time traffic analytics. What can that be used for? It can be used by a trucking company. UPS, FedEx can use data based upon traffic modeling to find the best route for their trucks. So they market it to secondary groups of customers, what they collect from the primary group, which is smart city projects. Cisco has got a location monitoring technology, basically street surveillance. They've got a network of surveillance cameras in many different places. For example, when the assassination of the CEO happened in New York City, one of the things that law enforcement used was the citywide network of surveillance cameras in order to find where the assassin had moved. So this can be used for predictive policing. Predictive policing is it's a loaded term. Cities use that. There are lots of civil rights violations as a consequence of predictive policing. It is basically trying to find locations in the city where crime is likely to happen and moving resources there preemptively before the crime happens, trying to stop it before it happens. So Cisco's location monitoring technology can be used for predictive policing as well. Street lighting data can be used to collect traffic metrics. Energy monitoring plans in buildings can be used to monitor employee movements, how much time are we spending at our workstations. That sort of data can be monitored and things like that. For every use, primary use, there is also a secondary use for the data. This from an article called 16 IoT Smart City Technology Companies Building the Future. They've got this table in that article. So what does it all say about the status of smart city data plans? And why is this of concern to citizens? The concern is this, that smart city programs premised on the collection of data are not able to completely control or predict the use of that data. We don't know where it ends up. And I'm not putting forward a conspiracy theory. I'm not saying that this is being deliberately done, but there is a good logical sense. In a good logical sense, you can say that some of the vagueness of smart city of data governance policy documents is deliberate. That the notable absence is deliberate because they want to give their vendor partners the opportunity to use the data without violating policy. So, so is that by design? I mean, is that really by design? That is the question. I don't have an answer here. I'm not speculating on an answer. I'm not giving an answer one way or the other. But it seems to be one possible conclusion. So the role of IT vendors, they have got these datafication plans going on. They have got alternative products that they bring to market. For example, Waze, for example, I mean, using traffic data, you can develop other products like Waze that can be sold to drivers. So datafication plans have got access to data as the primary goal. So what can we do about it? Well, we do need city data plans, and there are lots of reasons why we should advocate for it as citizens. There are a number of initiatives around the world that try to do that. For example, the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights, of 60 smart city advocates, 60 plus smart city advocates, trying to promote better governance of data at the city level, clear ownership of, clear articulation of data ownership and use in vendor relations. If you go back to the Hong Kong data plan, there is absolutely nothing about the vendor relationship. Who does that data belong to? Does it belong to the city or does it belong to the vendor? If it belongs to the city, then it has to follow the data policy guidelines. But if it is an extraterritorial vendor, for example, it's Cisco that controls that data, how can the city, how can the citizens of Hong Kong ensure that their data are not being used in ways that they have not authorized? How do you make sure of that? So that's the problem. And for that, these are the sort of solutions. So there is the Open Data Trust, the data institutes, they've got a data trust. They are trying to promote that as well. There are lots of initiatives out there that can try to promote better data governance models for smart cities. So I'll leave it there. I hope it has not been too fast, but I took 46 minutes, 1 minute more than promised. And so we have some time for Q&A.
Anyone on Zoom want to have a question? It's true.
No questions yet on Zoom.
Okay.
It's okay, I can ask a question. Well, first of all, thank you so much for a very interesting talk. To me, this is a new topic, but it's also kind of eye-opening for me. It just at least gives me an opportunity to learn something that I've not been exposed to. I think the recommendations you mentioned about advocacy, right, and also citizen input. And I think earlier when you showed the different categories, you mentioned that in Scandinavian countries, there seems to be higher level of civic engagement. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering whether there might be any sort of correlation between citizen civic engagement mm-hmm. versus the data protection plan, assuming that citizens who are more civically engaged might be more literate about the importance of data privacy and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great question. In fact, I came across an article that called City Data Governance, the double agency problem. The double agency problem is this: that the municipality acts as an agent in the principal agent relationship, right? The principal agent that in that theory, the city acts as the agent for us. As citizens.
Right.
But at the same time, the vendor is the agency for the municipality. So in that relationship, if there is a strong municipality, city leadership, combined with an active public, then you can have good data governance. That problem is solved. But it is harder to achieve because there are two hurdles. You need to have active and engaged citizens, plus unaware and active or powerful municipality. Sometimes one or the other is absent, so the citizens might demand better data protection, but the city is not able to deliver. Sometimes the city is aware, is able to get a vendor relationship, and in which case they're able to, it becomes more like an instrumental relationship, but they are not able to, the citizens are not able to articulate the demand for data protection. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason. So if you look at it in two different ways, right? Active citizens, non-active citizens, strong city government, weak city government. So it's like a 2x2 matrix, and good data governance happens only in one of those nodes out of 4. So the challenges are a little steep.
Yeah, very interesting, because I study intercultural communication, and there are dimensions to describe different societies, and one of the dimensions is so-called tight versus loose cultures, right? Some societies, they are just less tolerant of deviations, and therefore they have a lot more rules and policies in place, but others, they are just more loosely structured. So I was also curious whether there are maybe patterns in different societies in terms of, the more detailedness or more policies in place due to that kind of cultural influence.
That's very interesting, and I'll follow up that line of thinking. That was not a central part of our the analysis right now, but I think that definitely holds a lot of promise.
Sure, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Mr.
Yeah.
I have to take I have it speaking.
Thank you so much for the fascinating talk. I wanted to ask you because I have read a few papers that they were dealing with Hong Kong, and it was during basically study COVID-19, and they figured out that despite there was not so much trust in the government, they had a lot of trust in the smart city plans like e-governance, etc. So actually people were following the advice and what the government was saying because they believed in technology. I understood that probably it's not part of the studies that you presented, but do you see that people tend to trust the governments more because they used smart technologies, and perhaps that's the reason why they are more reluctant on, I don't know, civic, demonstrate against the ambiguity that you mentioned? Yeah.
That's an intriguing hypothesis. So the chain of argument you're saying is that smart technology is trusted more.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Initiatives that use technology are not questioned as much, even if the city government itself doesn't have a lot of public credibility.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's very interesting. That's also worth pursuing. So is trust in smart cities higher than trust in city governments? Very intriguing hypothesis. I'd like to follow that up too. Yeah.
Yes, there is a question on Zoom.
Yes, thank you very much. We have two questions on Zoom. The first is from Terry Graham. He says, I'm going to read from here. He says, speaking of smart technologies, you mentioned the example of data trust, which is still a third-party aggregator of data, but not under the control of the vendor. What about blockchain technology, where data protections, which is overuse of citizens' data, is far stronger? Are any cities exploring blockchain-driven solutions for decentralized data sharing and stronger data governance, or are the tech hurdles simply too great at the moment? Lack of blockchain knowledge inside city departments, etc.
Yeah, let me take that question. That's from Dr. Graham, right?
Yes.
Yes, I have not come across smart city projects that use blockchain, and I think your question contains the answer right there as well, because first of all, there are technical hurdles. It's a more complicated technology, and secondly, it also might run counter to some of the mandates. For example, open data and freedom of information regulations that cover smart city projects as government programs. So they may not be able to completely block access to data, and which is not the purpose either, because the purpose of city data is both to collect and use it in legitimate ways, but also to improve access to it. So the short answer, I've not come across examples of cities that are proposing to use blockchain to protect data.
Right. The second question is from one of our faculty members, Dr. Florence Saban. He says, thank you for the presentation. municipalities and vendors discuss data, there's usually a discourse of data neutrality. To what extent will data generated by particular social categories lead to sustainable smart cities? Will data generated by citizens with more advanced technologies transform the cities for everyone regardless?
That, I guess that is the hope. The better data can improve governance standards, can improve city services, can make cities more efficient. That means reduce costs of service provision in a lot of different categories. So the expectation is that data is a positive good, that it is a benefit, that it can reduce costs, improve services, and so on. So that's the premise. But data neutrality, I'm not entirely sure I understand that in terms of data neutrality. If you would clarify, or
Dr. Siban, you could unmute and ask your question directly,
yeah,
if that's
or,
okay.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Okay, so we have, okay, he means that data, meaning that data will be fair and not biased.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. Yes, yeah, it is definitely premised on data neutrality, but again, we can think of a lot of situations where data collection is either because of sampling or sample bias, is not representative of the population as a whole and therefore is unfair, or sometimes data can be used against the data subjects themselves, for example, insurance or medical data. So yeah, there are difficult questions to answer. Not all data collection is entirely benign.
Yes, he says, I fear it's not always biased free.
Yes.
Right, thank you very much. We have another question from one of our faculty members, Zoe. She says, thank you, Professor Jayakar. It's highly informative and meaningful. I wonder now, with more AI tech also gradually applied in smart city infrastructure, and how to even monitor AI algorithm and models from the civic perspective.
Right, again, a very important question. The algorithm use, and this goes back to Professor Serban's question as well, that can the data collection procedures and the use of data be made completely fair? It should be fair. Normatively, it makes a lot of sense to have fair data collection and use procedures, but how hard is it to do in practice? The question of algorithms also goes back to the same thing. Algorithms for a variety of search algorithms, for example, have been critiqued for being unfair and sometimes giving biased results, discriminating against population segments. So, yeah, so critical questions. And we cannot, I mean, I certainly don't have answers to all of these in terms of implementation.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
Because I was fascinated by the comment that you said that you are questioning or you're thinking that it seems that there is a deliberate gap, in the policies, because you have experience, right? I mean, you were working with the Indian government. I wanted to ask you, do the people that they govern, right, the politicians, are aware of that? Like, can they understand that actually, there are holes in the plans and they need to deal with it? Or because it's very fast, like what you described, we don't know where the data goes, they don't actually have the capabilities of understanding that something goes wrong?
Right, I think both of these are correct. In the sense that, first of all, I'm not saying that decision makers are doing this deliberately, like it's not a conspiracy. It is more in the absence of a more deliberative course of action. For example, like you're implementing these smart solutions, right? You're implementing a datafication plan for the entire city. Vendor is coming in. The vendor is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They have got very highly trained IT professionals coming in and making a presentation. The city leadership or bureaucrats or elected politicians who may not know the technology. They are guided by the vendor in many cases. The vendor provides certain solutions and says that this would be a good data plan for you. And the city picks it up. And remember, the cities are also not all like Beijing and New York City. There are small cities. There are lots of small cities out there that are implementing city data plans too. Everyone wants to have a smart city plan because that is the cool thing to do. But do they have the capabilities to evaluate a plan? Do they have the capabilities to like comparatively critique different vendor supplied technologies? They don't. And so it's in the breach of in the gulf of decision making that these sort of problems creep in. So not at all my implication that there is a deliberate conspiracy going on.
Right. I think we are now 2 minutes ahead of time. We would end the talk here. Is it okay if I share your slides with everybody else?
Sure.
Right. So if anyone is interested in Professor Jayakar's slides, I have just sent it to the chat box and you can access it from there. Right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today's seminar series. And this is where we'll be rounding off for today. Thank you very much, Professor Jayakar, for attending this session.
Thank you very much for having me.